second biggest winner of this weekend, Joe, has got to be Jalen Milroe at Alabama. Let me start off with this. I texted you this morning, because you're on West Coast time, I'm in Central Standard Time, and started breaking down games this morning. And I think I flabbergasted you because I texted you and said, hey, did you get to see the Alabama game? And, we had so much going on yesterday, we all had to go back and rewatch the film. Kalen DeBoer, look, Joe, we made the question throughout the offseason already. Is DeBoer really going to go with Jalen Milroe? And Brody, the biggest winner of the entire offseason, if this continues to progress, might be Milroe with DeBoer being there. Joe, he looked so good. He was making throws in tight windows. His footwork, it was not good. I texted a quarterback buddy of mine who does a lot of draft stuff with guys, and I said, can you look at Jalen Milroe for me and tell me I'm not crazy? Footwork, he texted me back and said, footwork elite. So I look at a guy like Jalen Milroe and say, Joe, I know it's just spring, but when you're dotting dudes up like that, have a day, young man. He looked pretty impressive.
Yeah, and before I kind of get into this, I just want to say we're not trying to overreact to any of these spring game performances. Like there is obvious.
We're reacting to the day.
Yes. We're not going to sit here, and I'm not going to sit here and say the performance that you get from certain guys is enough to depict them as a Heisman Trophy winner. I'm not going to go that far. But last year I felt like Jalen Milroe was super robotic at times. He just did not feel natural. And not only did it show up in his footwork, like you're talking about, his mechanics, but also his decision-making. And I felt like that was the most natural version of Jalen Milroe that I've ever seen. The fact that in just the spring he's made these improvements makes me not worried, but very excited to see what's going to happen for him during fall camp as they're leading up to the start of the season. He is extremely physically gifted as a runner and as an athlete. And if he can be more consistent with his accuracy and his decision-making, that is going to make him one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I really, really think. What was that comment?
I was trying to delete it. I'm not dealing with that today.
What the hell is that? Some clown. It's back to my point, though. I think that Jalen Milroe, the way that he looked in this game, he's a completely different player. He looks bulked up. He looks just ready to take over and be one of the best players in the country. I'm not going to say that I feel that it's going to happen and come to fruition just yet, but I was blown away with the version of Jalen Milroe that showed up and played in this game.
I'm not going to go there, okay? Because, the voice of college football, I think, for Joe, what you and I do for a long time was our good friend Bill King. And I go on with him every week. And I when a spring game happens, I have Bill King in the back of my head saying, Blake, don't overreact to a spring game. But it's not, Joe, that I think that he's going to throw for 3,500 yards and 35-plus TDs. This is what happened, at least in my opinion. Now, two things here that I think I noticed the most. Good on Kalen DeBoer for remaking things offensively. What do I mean? Joe, they threw the ball around, but if you notice, they would go in pistol. They ran a lot of zone read. He looked like he liked him having a running quarterback. I think the second thing was everything got set up throughout the day because of how Jam Miller ran the football. Womack, the DC, started backing his safeties out a little bit, and they started running the football effectively. And quite honestly, that offensive line dominated that D line yesterday, which is going to be the bad part of yesterday. If you're at Alabama, then you're like, oh man, they kind of got pushed around. Maybe we do need to go hit the portal for a DT. But Kalen DeBoer remaking things for a guy like Jalen Milroe, I would, if I'm an Alabama fan today, I feel a lot better than I did when Kalen DeBoer got hired because there's so much of the unknown. And I thought offensively they looked good. I got to say this. I think their running game is going to be a lot better than I thought it would be. I did think, Joe, personally, that Kalen DeBoer would try to fit a square peg into a round hole. I didn't know that he would change things this dramatically because of the quarterback he had. Joe, they were running deep stuff when it comes to run schematics in a spring game. They were running power. They were running zone. They were running deep zone, where you just run and try to get as wide to the field as you can. Every blocking scheme that an offensive lineman can do and can have was run yesterday. They were dynamic. I see everybody on Twitter telling me that Alabama was vanilla on offense. Bullshit they were.
What? Who's saying that?
Look at Auburn. Look at Auburn fans, and they were, it was vanilla. The only thing vanilla like that was there was the ice cream at the local Sonic, okay? Because they did a lot of good things. Here's the thing, though. Jalen Milroe and that running game had a really big day. The problem is, you know what else? Even though the offense looked better and DeBoer calling plays and doing things, yeah, it looked a lot better. You know what doesn't look like Alabama right now? That front seven. Joe, they got pushed around on simple inside zone. That would be what I would be worried about.
Yeah, to quickly hit on the running game you just talked about there, I was really impressed with Jalen Milroe. Man, he was running hard, he was running downhill, he was running vertically. Really good body control. I thought that he was just finding extra yards here and there. I wouldn't be shocked if Jalen Milroe isn't a top 5 statistical back in the SEC this upcoming season. I was really, really impressed with the way that he played. To round out the thoughts on Jalen Milroe, though, I just want to say that we a couple weeks ago talked about how we weren't even sure if he was going to be the starter, because it felt like it would make more sense for Ty Simpson or Austin Mack.
By the way,
he looked fine.
Holy Ty Simpson.
Yeah, he looked better than I was anticipating. But
me too.
I think that as you're talking about here, where there's so much uncertainty with a new head coach after Nick Saban has been there for so freaking long, that it's good to know that there is one pillar of certainty, is that Jalen Milroe has proven that there are no questions anymore, that he is the starting quarterback and he's taking these strides forward and that he's continuing to get better and better. But to round out with the thought that you just had, yeah, defensively, they looked messy. And I don't know if that is just the case that Kalen DeBoer comes in, the first thing that he's going to inject life into is going to be the offensive side of the football, and that it's going to take a little bit of time to figure out the defensive identity. It's also really important to recognize they lost a lot of bodies. Like they lost a lot of guys that are going to be top 100, top 150 draft picks in the upcoming draft.
Right.
And the next up might not be sufficient enough because they haven't developed yet and they no longer have the defensive presences that they used to have on the coaching staff. So we said this when DeBoer was hired, be very wary of if they're defensively going to be as competitive as they were. And they might be a little bit more average than they were dominant in the past.
I got to say this though, Joe, they did lose a lot of stuff, but you know who also lost a lot of bodies? That offense. And to be real with you, Joe, both sides of the ball is learning a new system. And normally what happens is when you have a whole new coaching staff, the defense takes a step forward before they do offensively, right? Like sure. every time that I have been around a new coaching staff ever, either in my media career or playing career, the defense should normally take the first step, because Joe, you're probably only learning like 10 to 15 plays of install. Like, what are your 10 to 15 base plays that you'll run? Where yesterday, offensively, they ran a lot of different things in a lot of different formations. My point would be here, the DBs, I thought, had a horrible day. They look lost, and they lost a lot of DBs. Joe, I know what I'm about to say is all Blake's at ACC homer. Kalen DeBoer cannot come in this conference. And if you have a defensive performance like that, and that is weekly, you're going to be LSU from last year. I don't give two Rudy Poos how good you are offensively. I don't care. When you get pushed around like that and your DBs look that lost, Joe, it's not like they were doing anything dynamic in the passing game. What did he run yesterday? They ran post, hitches, slants, digs, comebacks. Oh, and the tight end ran a crossing route that Jalen Milroe dotted up twice. They weren't being dynamic completely in the passing game. So the running game, they were actually more dynamic, which surprised me. How can you be so lost defensively when both sides are having to learn everything new? here's what I think to your point. I say all that to agree with your point. Not only did they lose bodies, man, Joe, they're about to take a massive step back because there's nothing. If you look like that against Vanilla, what's going to happen when you get to Rocky Road?
Yeah.
Okay. Like what happens when things start getting more complex? Now, you got to give grace. And every time there's a new coaching staff, you have to give grace. And I will give them grace. But for me, and just looking at them and defensively, I would be so worried going into fall.
Well, that's the whole point. Is that Alabama, and I've said this every single time that we've talked about it, Alabama fans, you got to be patient with this process. They're not going to be 11, 12 wins in 2024. They're just not. 9 to 10 wins. 10 wins would be an amazing season, I think, with the transition that's happening, with all of the important players that left in the portal, all of your depth left. No, actually, sorry, that's an extreme. Not all of your depth.
I'm about to say, you better walk that back.
Losing Caleb Downs was very visibly critical.
Very.
The secondary looked a little lost. And then there were some key depth pieces, some younger guys defensively that decided to go elsewhere, which they've got enough talent to replace. But what I was getting at earlier is that there needs to be more development. They have historically been a team where group goes to the NFL, the young guys have been getting coached up and ready to go, and then they hit the ground running the next season. I do not have that same level of confidence, and that's why I keep reiterating, be patient with the results that are going to happen, because it's not going to be the Nick Saban Alabama team that you saw in the past. And if you get frustrated, it's only going to make this process even more difficult.
Well, and Alabama tried to fluff it. They said Milroe went 3 of 7. Joe, he had 3 completions on the opening drive.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, what part of them going down the field, marching down the field and scoring did Alabama fans look at Jalen Milroe and said, it's the exact same? What the fuck are you talking about? So, I mean, Joe, am I crazy here? Like, because I see Alabama fans saying Jalen Milroe looked the exact same. Said who? Said whom? Because, Joe, what are we missing? 3 of 7, my ass.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.